Okay, good morning, and thank you for joining us at this press conference with the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on the Sudan, which is pleased to take this opportunity to update you on their latest findings ahead of their presentation to the Human Rights Council at 5:30 p.m. today. As you may know, the fact-finding mission was established by the Council in 2023 and was mandated to investigate all alleged human rights violations and violations of international humanitarian law in the context of the ongoing armed conflict that began over 2 years ago. Now the chair, Mr. Mohammed Chande Othman, will deliver an opening statement, followed by fellow experts, Joy Ngozi Nzelo to my right, and Mona Rishmawi on the far right. And after that, we'll open the floor to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are honored to present this update as part of our mandate under Human Rights Council Resolution 54-2 of 11th October 2024 and Resolution 57-2 of 9th of October 2024 that extended our mandate for 1 more year until the end of October this year. Just to recapitulate, since we will be speaking to different aspects of our mandate, there are 5 essential tasks that were assigned to us. One is to investigate international humanitarian law and human rights violations, and including the identification of its root causes. Secondly, to collect, analyze, document, and preserve evidence. Thirdly, to identify perpetrators, be they individuals or entities. Fourthly, is to cooperate and ensure complementarity with judicial mechanisms, national, regional, international. And fifthly is really to propose recommendations for accountability and justice for victims and survivors with a view to ending impunity. The conflict in Sudan has become increasingly complex, brutal, protracted, egregious, and with ethnic dimensions, and civilians continue to pay the highest price. In our view, the protection of civilians still suffers from really a colossal deficit in this conflict. Secondly, I think in Sudan, and our analysis shows that there can be no substantial peace without justice and accountability, and this is rooted really in the reality, history of Sudan, and of the conflicts that have been cyclic in Sudan. With regard to the current situation on the ground, we can say from our analysis and from our investigations, first-hand sources, direct interview with witnesses, and other methodologies that we have used, that hostilities between the Sudanese armed forces, SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces have escalated during this 1-year period, with both parties and their affiliated militia responsible for grave violations of international humanitarian law and human rights. Civilians have been killed in indiscriminate airstrikes and ground attacks, subjected to sexual violence of extreme proportions, forcible displacement, and deprivation of humanitarian assistance, which will also reflect to you during this briefing. There has also been a deliberate obstruction and weaponization of humanitarian aid, which have worsened famine conditions, particularly in Darfur. I will now invite Mona to go in more details concerning some of our findings in relation to the violations that have been going on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Let me start by saying that while the bombs and bullets dominates the headlines in Sudan, a quieter but more brutal, perhaps, war is being waged on the bodies of women, girls, and marginalized communities. Sexual violence has become widespread and systematic weapon of war. Women and girls, particularly in areas under the control of the Rapid Response Forces, are being raped, gang-raped, abducted, and enslaved. Some are forced into so-called marriages that amount to sexual slavery. The violence is rampant in displacement camps. These are spaces that meant to offer safety. Between December 2023 and December 2024 alone, there was a 288% increase in individuals seeking services related to sexual violence and gender-based violence, according to UN Women. These numbers are devastating, and they are still an undercount. The true scale is far greater, hidden by stigma, fear, and deliberate targeting of survivors when they speak out. We also received credible reports of sexual violence against men and boys, an often invisible crime shrouded in even deeper silence. Meanwhile, hunger itself is being used as a weapon. Humanitarian aid, as we just heard, is not simply blocked, it is deliberately manipulated. SAF imposes suffocating bureaucratic obstacles. The RSF hijacks convoys and prevents aid from reaching those in desperate need. This siege on relief efforts is not an accident. It is part of a strategy of war. Nowhere is more clearer than in the Zamzam displacement camp, where children are dying of hunger due to a complete aid blockade. According to the World Food Programme, famine is no longer a threat. It is already claiming lives. Since the conflict began, over 100 humanitarian and medical workers have been killed. Just 2 weeks ago, on 2nd June, a UN convoy en route to Al-Fashir was bombed, killing 5 staff members. Each side blames the other, but the result is the same. Aid is being strangled and the civilians are being starved. Medical care is under siege. Hospitals are being targeted, not protected. The RSF has shelled the Saudi hospital in Al-Fashir repeatedly. In May, the RSF drone attack destroyed Al Ubaid International Hospital in North Kordofan, one of the last remaining clinics, killing 6 civilians. These are intentional acts. The targeting of food, medicine, survivors, and aid workers are violations of international law and a clear warning to the world. Let me be clear, what is happening in Sudan is not only a humanitarian crisis, it is a crisis of humanity itself. We cannot allow the suffering of Sudanese women, children, and survivors of violence to remain hidden. Their pain is not secondary. It must be placed at the center of any response. They are not collateral damage. They are the conscience of this war. Thank you, and I give the floor to my colleague, Joy Ngozi Ozilo.
Thank you, Mona and Chair. I thank you and I welcome all of you to this press conference. I just want to quickly speak on accountability and the Nairobi consultation that the fact-finding mission convened for 3 days between 28th to 30th May in Nairobi, Kenya. That had in attendance about 145, including 90 Sudanese survivors, legal professionals, Sudanese civil society, and other regional and international actors, including the African Union, IGAD, United Nations, and international NGOs. The consultation was to assess pathways for accountability justice and reparation for Sudanese. So the consultation, of course, took place at the backdrop of the deepening conflict that has been marked by mass atrocities, as my colleagues have elaborated on. It is important to note that there is the recommendation that came following this consultation identified some clear priorities, while participants emphasized that justice must be part of any peace process and shouldn't be deferred. The absence of accountability was clearly noted as what has fueled previous cycles of violence. So recommendation focus on hybrid justice models and identified some clear priorities to include preserving evidence and testimony of survivors' testimony, building capacity for Sudanese civil society and legal actors, ensuring justice for sexual violence victims and survivors, establishing independent, victim-centered justice mechanism, and securing a UN presence on the ground. In terms of international responsibility, we urge all states to respect and enforce the arms embargo under United Nations Security Council Resolution 1556. States with influence over the parties must ensure compliance with international humanitarian law under Common Article 1 of Geneva Conventions. Continued armed transfers or material support to parties committing violations risk state complicity in international crimes. This is not only a legal obligation, it is a moral and political imperative. I would therefore like to turn over to Chair to wrap up this press conference. Thank you.
Yeah, finally, let me offer 3 reflections. One is that the conflict in Sudan is not over. No one can predict with any accuracy when and how it will end. The warring parties continue and have not heeded to calls for immediate cessation of hostilities, calls by the UN Security Council, the African Union, other regional organizations, and other impartial intermediaries. Secondly, there is a direct link between the flow of arms in Sudan, armed hostilities, and the resulting violence amounting to violations of international humanitarian law and human rights violations. And thirdly, as a fact-finding mission, we call on all stakeholders to support the work, but more important, I think, to amplify the voices of Sudanese victims and survivors, which we continue to closely engage. They have trust in the Human Rights Council, in its mechanism, and therefore we urge really that the survivors and victims of Sudan should not be let down by the Human Rights Council and all others that who have supported their cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for those opening remarks. Now we open the floor to questions. First, we'll start with the room, and then we'll go to AFP online. But in the room, in the front row on the right, if you could just identify yourself and the media outlet that you work for. Thank you.
Yeah, Laurent Sierra, Swiss News Agency. Thank you for the briefing. In your first report, you were concluding that RSF had perpetrated acts which could amount to crimes against humanity. and for SAF it was rather acts which would amount to war crimes. So the question is, since then, in the pattern that you're describing in your news release and today in the last month, has that been confirmed, or the fact that you mentioned reprisals, for instance, by SAF after having taken again Khartoum, does that show that there might be also a widespread intent that could amount to crimes against humanity? And then briefly, if I may, so you mentioned that you started to compile a list of possible perpetrators. Are there more RSF or more SAF names on that list? And how many countries, how many judiciary system of countries have you started to collaborate with? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think the patterns that we saw in the first report more or less the same, in the sense that both sides are committing war crimes. We didn't say that SAF did not commit. We actually think SAF, particularly the bombardment and the shelling, does indicate war crimes as well as torture and other activities. We spoke about crimes against humanity, particularly in the context of persecution of certain ethnic groups. This continues, and I think our information most probably will be more or less in the same direction in this way. We are still investigating, and this is just an update what we are doing today. We are still investigating other features, and I think you'll hear more from us in September with regard to where we are going with this. With regard to the list, you have to excuse me, the list is confidential, so I think what we could say perhaps clearly is that the list has the parties to the conflict. The parties to the conflict are reflected in the list. Which one is more, that's, I think, particularly as it is work in progress as well, I don't want to really zoom on this. We have a mandate to cooperate with international judicial bodies, and maybe I'll keep that to the chair,
Yeah, so the mandate asks us to ensure cooperation and complementarity with regional, international, and other mechanisms. So we have close cooperation with the ICC and have an agreement in that regard. Again, confidential basis, but we are closely in contact. We have had working relationship with the joint African Union and the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, joint commission, and we have had exchanges on best practices. We also collaborate closely with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and his designated expert. We work very closely with the AU Special Envoy on the prevention of genocide and mass atrocities, Mr. Adama Dieng. Very close collaboration because he is responsible partly identifying some of the risk factors that are there in this conflict, and therefore we exchange notes in terms of, so we are really working, as I said, to collaborate, because I think it is a collective effort. And I think now, of course, you will see in our recommendations that we had proposed that accountability and the kind of mechanism. I think that is why we had the consultations involving Sudanese, over around 145 recently in Nairobi, to see what kind of judicial mechanism may be acceptable to Sudanese. So that, again, is work in progress, but I think come now in October, we should be able to offer or to recommend to the Council some more concrete measures in terms of which judicial mechanism would be appropriate, but of course strongly having an input of Sudanese, and we think this could help feed in any peace process or negotiation towards peace. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the front row on the left.
Yes, Catherine Fiancon-Bokonga, France 24. I'd like to come back on what has been mentioned about the flow of arms. You just mentioned about more concrete measures. So I'd like to know what kind of concrete measures would you like to be taken about the flow of arms, and particularly also if you've identified the direct links between arms in Ukraine and arms finding that are used in Sudan by the two parties involved in the conflict. Thank you.
Yes, I think this is a very pertinent question. You will recall that in our last report and recommendation, one of the concrete measures that we had proposed was that the arms embargo, which was sanctioned by the UN Security Council in 2004, only covering Darfur, to extend throughout the territory of Sudan. I think this is one of the key recommendations that we had, and it has a history. The AU panel on Sudan, I think 2003, 2004, which was headed by Thabo Mbeki, president of South Africa. At that time, he was dealing only with Darfur. And he said it is insufficient to control arms only in Darfur, for the violence is all over Sudan. And at that time, they were dealing with small arms. And now we know the kind of arms that are being used: heavy artillery, modern warfare, drones, and in fact, they have escalated. As a fact-finding mission, we have not gone deep ourselves into an inquiry into arms supply. I think there are other competent bodies, but I think it is public knowledge, based upon a number of sources, that there is an external flow of arms in the Sudan. And I can refer you to some of these sources: the Security Panel of Experts on Sudan, the report or resolution of the US Congress, 118 Congress, the second session of the Senate, 2 reports by Amnesty International, New Weapons Fueling the Conflict in Sudan, Human Rights Watch, New York Times, and so on. So it is, you could say, an open secret. The question is, and that is what we are urging, and I think between now and October, try to sharpen our recommendation. But I think we think that it is insufficient that the arms embargo only extends to Darfur. Its effect is limited because we know the mobility, first of all, of the warring parties. Okay, they are very fluid. RSF was in Khartoum, it was out of Khartoum, and so on. It is in Sennar, it is out of Sennar, it is here and it is there. So there's a lot of fluidity. So I think this question of arms supply, external actors, and so on, I think that's why we say, and we will say to the Human Rights Council, that it needs vigilance. Now, who is to exercise that vigilance? I think it needs a collective action by the UN Security Council panel and others, really, because we think that, and we said in our last report, that if the flow of arms stop, there is a correlation really with de-escalation. And I think this analysis remains valid. Thank you.
Thank you. We can go next to Emma Farge from Reuters in the far back, and then we'll come up to the front. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I wanted to follow up on your remarks about humanitarian aid being deliberately obstructed. In this regard, there was a June 3rd attack on a humanitarian convoy that was going to El Fashir, which you mentioned, that killed, I think, at least 5 people. What can you tell us about this incident? Have you identified a perpetrator? And was it an aerial attack, maybe with drones? There was rumors of that on social media. What have your investigations shown? Thank you.
I'll come back to you. We can come back to you with regard to this particular incident, Emma. You know, I know that you are following it, and you reported on it, which is great. But I would like just to say 2 things about the attacks on humanitarian workers in general. I think what worries us a lot is that these are the first respondents to crisis. We mentioned 100, the number of 100. People who were attacked. One organization alone, which is the Emergency Response Room, which has lost more than 65 people by themselves. These are Sudanese who are working in their communities to try to provide food, medical care, legal advice for those who are detained, and so on. So the attack on these humanitarian workers and human rights defenders is really crippling the delivery of aid in a lot of these communities. It has impact on starvation. It has impact on famine. It has impact on access to basic things like food, like the kitchens that they actually organize and so on. So it's very, very serious. And really, we think a lot of these people were killed directly, but a number of them have been detained, and a number also have been subjected to reprisals. Some actually disappeared. So these attacks, I think we need beyond the known let's say, attacks like the one on the World Food Program. And of course, we all highlight it because it's the World Food Program. But beyond that, there is, I think, systematic attack on humanitarian workers, which has impact on the delivery of humanitarian services on the ground. And of course, with the figure that we spoke about is humanitarian workers and medical workers also, I think, and the attacks on hospitals and so on is really part and parcel of this issue. So I just wanted to put to highlight the broader question behind this, but we'll come back to you about this particular incident. What I can say to you for now, both sides are blaming each other, but we have looked deeply into this and we can come back to you on it.
I just want to add a very small point, that also that in addition to this, that humanitarian aid is so insufficient. It's not enough. And to bring to your attention that many Sudanese are dying from hunger, and especially those who have been detained. And in detention, they are dying. And the millions affected by absolute hunger is increasing by the day. And that's also one key area the international community must make double their efforts.
Thank you. We'll go to the front row. Please go ahead.
My name is Annegret Mattery. I'm working with several Swiss media. You mentioned in your press release the involvement of foreign actors. Could you please say who they are, and or at least name some of them? And then the RSF apparently wants to have to create their own state. Do you think do you see the possibility that, or the danger that Sudan will fall apart You didn't understand?
No, we didn't hear the last part.
Yeah, RSF, they want to have their own state, apparently. And as you are speaking now, is as if Sudan will stay one state. But I would like to know how, do you see the possibility that Sudan will fall apart? Thank you.
Yeah, the two aspects of the question. The first one really is about the foreign actors. And as I said, this area, we rely on other sources, but credible sources. So we could say they are credible allegations. I think if you look at the last report of the Security Council panel of experts on Sudan, which I think is quite authoritative, the extent they have gone is also to find credible allegation. And I think for us, we are guided by some standards in terms of verification. Okay, but I think that, as I said, it's an open secret because if you look what has been presented, some of these reports pinpoint to the origin of some of the weapons that were used on the ground. Now, how did they come there? Who brought them there? How were they procured? And so on is subject to further inquiry. Okay, but they are, as I said, it is not disputed, and I think if you look at the resolutions, even by the European Union, by the UN Security Council, and so on, is calling upon external actors really to defrain or refrain from involvement in supplying arms. I think secondly, yes, the fragmentation of Sudan has many, many dimensions. Sudanese society. One fragmentation, of course, is the announcement by RSF of a parallel government. Civil society organizations also have different groupings. The parties are using, all of them, allied militia, which have regional identity. The conflict is having ethnic dimension. So all this undermines the social fabric of one Sudan. And everybody agrees, and I think the principal organizations, the UN and others, have called for the integrity, territorial integrity of Sudan, one Sudan, and so on. So I think as we move forward with this conflict, there are many, many aspects, I think, that make Sudan fragile. But I think, as I said, the peace process and so on should also be inclusive. That's why we have urged, for example, that women and youth should be part of the peace process. Nobody should be excluded. So I think these are all issues of fragmentation that have to be looked at in totality in terms of a sustainable peace for Sudan, and initiative towards that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one question online yeah, we'll come back to you. We'll take a question from Agence France Presse. If you could please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for taking my question. Agnès Pedro from AFP. I would like to ask you a question about chemical weapons. At the end of May, the United States have said that they have determined that the Sudan army has used chemical weapons last year, and that they will then impose sanctions. So I wanted to ask you, what can you tell us about that? And in particular, if you have any information or evidence indicating that the army or other parties have used chemical weapons? Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. We hear as well some allegations from time to time, but we have nothing to confirm these allegations, so I leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. You had a follow-up?
Yes, it was about what Ms. Edzelo just mentioned about insufficient humanitarian aid and Sudanese dying because of a lack of food. So I'd like you mentioned some people died in jail. So could you give us more details about the number of people who died from hunger in jail and where? Thank you.
With regard to the yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for that question. With regard to the exact number, we can come back, but I hope you know overall that at least over 25 million under threat of famine. And if you look at the food insecurity, of course, is increasing. And then for those in detention, those who are already, whose freedom are already denied is even worse because the risk of abandoning them and they are dying there from real starvation already. Yes, so I understand the number. So the number we can supply you because this is what, we are getting information and we are also collecting evidence systematically on that and other issues and sharing with appropriate bodies. And our secretariat, if we bilaterally take it up, can supply you with the information we have so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the room or online? Okay, would you like to make any more comments, statements? Okay. All right, thank you very much for joining us today, and that brings us to the end of this press conference. Have a good day. Thanks.